My guest on this week's episode of Here Comes Pod is another legend of the UK acquisitions business, having worked at every one of the main UK terrestrial broadcasters. Jay Kandola started her acquisitions career at the BBC, before moving on to Channel 4, and then ultimately heading up acquisitions at Channel 5 and ITV. She is now a consultant, working with Australian platform Foxtel amongst others, and is undoubtedly one of the most popular executives in the international TV market. We cover a lot of ground in the episode, and I'm sure you'll enjoy Jay's company as much as I did. Hi Jay, welcome to the pod.
Hello Danny, nice to be here with you.
Excellent. So good place to start is at the beginning and how you got into the world of TV, because I think you probably came more from the finance side of things, right?
That is completely correct. I think it would be fair to say that getting a job in TV was pure fluke. I had no great calling, in my earlier life. So what I did was I thought it would be a good idea to take a degree in accountancy because I thought it was generic and it would give me a good grounding in, life in general, and it would help me in a work context. It was incredibly boring degree to do, but in the end, it did serve me well. So my first job was actually as an accounts assistant. And after about 18 months of accounting for fertilizer, I realized that I really did have to leave. And I walked into accountancy personnel, a recruitment company, and asked them to find me a job where the product or service was something that I could be proud of after having accounted for manure. And so they basically sent me off for an interview at Channel 4.
So it was finance at Channel 4, then finance at the BBC, and then programme acquisitions at the BBC.
I just thought, you know what, Jay, you really have got to get yourself a job that has got some editorial component in it. And so I picked up Ariel, the in-house magazine, and then I saw my eyes landed on deputy editor of acquisitions for BBC One. And I looked at the list of things that they needed you to be kind of like proficient in. I found that I could do a few of them only. And I thought, what the heck, let's just give it a go. And I applied for the job and I really did my homework, Danny. I'm like, oh my God, I wanted this job so badly. I mean, I don't think I've ever prepared for another job more than my first acquisitions job. And that was how I got my first job. I mean, it was with June Dromgoole and Alan Howden, legends in their own kind of lunchtime. And I got the job and it was brilliant. I loved it.
What kind of shows and content was coming through BBC acquisitions at that point?
Oh, well, so for BBC One, where I was, the big show was clearly Neighbours. And in the main, it was the kind of, showcase of the best feature films you could get at the time. So my job was to basically ensure that at any given time, any given year, we had, 7 or 10 of the top 10 box office hits of that year. And in terms of American shows, really, they were on BBC Two. And they were a lot of sci-fi, or the Star Trek franchise was there. Things like Outer Limits, Sue Deeks, managed to snag the X-Files. There were things like Seinfeld. BBC Two was really the home of some of the best American shows. And BBC One was really, it's about making sure that they had the best movies.
So when we first met, you were at Channel 4 and June was there. I guess there was a connection between June being there and you being there.
That's right. I think I owe most of my career to June Dromgoole. I really do, because she was the one who was instrumental in hiring me in the first place at the BBC. And I think what she saw in me was a bit of a kindred spirit, in so much as we were both quite business-minded. We weren't film buffs. We were horribly populist. We wanted to just buy movies and TV shows if they came up. That got June's phrase, bums on seats. She said, Jay, it's all BBC One is bums on seats. That's all we're concerned about. So basically, I think, she was a kindred spirit. She was poached by Michael Jackson when he became the CEO. at Channel 4. And when she got the job, she very kindly asked me to go and join her as her head of series buying, which was incredible given I hadn't really bought, I think, a single US series at that time. But she obviously had faith in me. And I got the job because I think she saw some potential in me that maybe I didn't see, to be totally honest.
So how did you go about making the transition to series buying?
But the way I approached the job, it had to be really quick and systematic because my first LA screenings were about 2 weeks after I started at Channel 4. I mean, they were there. And so I had about 2 weeks to prepare for the LA screenings. And not being an expert, I mean, I was not an expert in buying US series. I had not bought one. So I did what I thought was the most sensible preparation. And I listed out all the big US series that had become hits in the past decade. And I screened all the pilots before going to that first set of screenings. And I also had somebody very wise who I could always refer to. And that was Rick Mitz, who was the consultant for Channel 4. He was based in Hollywood. He'd written books about sitcoms, the A to Z on the US sitcom. And Rick was just incredibly generous because I could ask him the kind of idiot question that you were never going to ask back at home in Horseferry Road. So that's how I prepared. I had Rick, who was incredibly knowledgeable and kind and nurturing. And then, I'm a SWAT. I basically just swatted up everything that had worked. And then I picked out some failures as well, things that had been bought that had been not, great. And then just tried to somehow work out some sort of system so that when we did our screenings in LA, and we did our critiques at the end of the day, I was able to offer an opinion without being kind of not heard, I guess.
Was Channel 4 your heyday?
I mean, I love my current job. I'm a consultant and I work for Foxtel and it's fantastic. But if I leave the consultancy days to one side for the minute, I would say I had the most fun at Channel 5, but Channel 4 was definitely amazing because when I got there, we had inherited some fantastic shows brought by somebody who people don't really remember much, and that's Mari McDonald. Mari McDonald had the best eye in the business. She had bought some fantastic shows. When I arrived, she had already bought Ally McBeal, Dawson's Creek, and South Park. So, my first job was to make sure that they got good slots in the schedule, were marketed properly, that the press covered them, and that they became franchises in the same way that Friends, ER, Frasier had become franchises. When I joined Channel 4, it had a huge reputation already for being the best place for US shows. So there's a level on which I guess we were a little bit spoiled because if anyone had a great show, they were going to knock on your door first anyway and ask you to buy it, even though you may end up paying maybe more than the next person. At Channel 4, it was going to be very rare that a US studio was going to say no to you as a home for US shows because they had done it so well. So it was fantastic. It was a fantastic, fantastic, fantastic time. Sex and the City, say, for example, we bought Sex and the City when we were there. And for the last episode of Sex and the City, June and myself decided, look, we should really do something nice with this. And so we hired a fantastic cinema, only allowed 100 top women to be there. Men were not allowed. There was a special raffle, and the winning ticket got you a pair of fabulous Manolo Blahniks. And, that was Channel 4. I mean, what's not to like about Channel 4? So yes, it was absolutely fantastic, fabulous time.
So you were one of the custodians of the super juggernaut that was and still is Friends.
Well, yes, I mean, we inherited Friends, obviously, from Mari McDonald. And I was at the BBC at the time. So this is me telling a story, secondhand. Channel 4 had really, really, really wanted ER, and they got ER. And Warner Brothers basically said, yeah, sure, you can have ER at some price tag, but you have to take one of our comedies. And all eyes turned to Rick Nix, who said, oh, God, I've got to pick out of that pile of poo, precise words. So he might have used juicier language. And he more or less said something along the lines of, well, the least offensive sitcom in there is probably Friends. And that's how Friends became a part of the package. And I think Ashley Hill was the scheduler at Channel 4 at the time. They played the first series of Friends, and they could see that obviously it was becoming a big hit in the States. But Ashley was the master scheduler. So what he did was people here found it a part way through. So the minute it had finished, he repeated it again. And the minute it had finished repeating, series 2 landed. And it became this absolute beast, basically, absolute beast. And really, probably in many ways, the thorn in the side of Channel 4, because you had to keep it. And it was almost keep it at all costs, really. So, we paid dearly for it, but it was a fantastic show. So, it was what it was, but it did cause as much pain as it caused joy, I think.
But it was poached at one point, wasn't it?
It wasn't poached. There was an attempt to poach it. Channel 5 was launching at the time. And in those days, people basically bought shows in 2 seasons. So Channel 4 had season 1 and season 2 of ER and Friends. Channel 5 was launching. And I think Dawn Airy was there at the time. And they decided that they wanted it. And so they went behind the scenes and joined up with Sky and agreed that Sky could have it first and that they, Channel 5, could get it second. And they thought they had it in the bag, but they didn't have it in the bag because there was no signature on that deal. And it was one of those things where there was no way that show was not going to stay with Channel 4. And Michael Grade, who was the CEO at the time, did what he had to do to ensure he got it. And I won't tell you what he did, but it was very clever and very smart. And he ensured that Channel 4 kept those 2 shows. It meant that overnight, Jeffrey Schlesinger found himself on a plane coming back to the UK to talk to Channel 4 about the show and not Channel 5. It did mean that we had to share with Sky, but the show stayed with Channel 4.
And then back to Channel 4 first run in the end.
Yes, that's right. So it went first run to Sky for a few seasons. And then actually the deal was done by the inimitable June Drumgoole. She'd arrived at Channel 4 and she knew that the biggest deal she had to do was renew Friends and ER with Jeff Schlesinger at Warner Brothers. I mean, it doesn't really get much worse than that. It's the honest truth of it. And so she was absolutely formidable. She kind of caught everybody on the hop because, we renewed way earlier than we needed to. She lined all the guys up. And as you know, June had an army background, which meant the guys really listened to her. And, I should have learned from her. I should have taken a sabbatical in the army at some point. Maybe people would have done what I wanted to have them do. But anyway, she lined up, all the guys and said, if you want, the show, this is what we're going to do. And she then took them all to the States and basically gave Warner Brothers a time frame within which to do the deal. And they did the deal with her. She didn't leave without the deal, Danny. Sometimes that's what it takes.
Sometimes that is what it takes. Sometimes you just
and furthermore, interestingly, what we did was we bought both the pay and free TV rights for the show. And it was never, ever any question that we wouldn't give the pay rights to Sky because the deal was so eye-wateringly expensive. We just thought, okay, we'll buy both sets of rights, we'll control our destiny, but of course we'll give the pay TV rights to Sky. And then one day, Michael Jackson sitting there and he's going, well, I've got a channel to launch. It's E4, I'm keeping them. And basically finance and sales were told, make it work. And they did. They made it work. And so Channel 4 became the home for both the pay and free TV rights of Warner Brother content.
What's incredible is that Friends continues to be an absolute behemoth. And you see this battle around its exploitation on Netflix and now moving on to HBO Max. I mean, what a phenomenon as a show, and great to have been a part of that process as well in your own way.
Yeah, no, it's a great to be a part of that process. But you know what? It just goes to show, though, that those shows are only about 20 minutes long. They're about 22 minutes long. And, I find myself sometimes just sitting in front of the TV and watching either Friends or The Big Bang Theory, because I think The Big Bang Theory is very similar to Friends, actually. They're both absolute masterpieces in how you write comedy and how you write character and how you let characters develop. And the reason people still kind of battle over those kind of shows is they're so repeatable. They are so repeatable. And they're annoying because you watch one episode and then you think, oh, okay, I'll watch another and then another. And then you have to tear yourself away. And this is like, a decade after the show's been and gone, really.
You ended up at Channel 5, heading up acquisitions, and you said that was the most fun. What made it so much fun?
It was a number of things, really. I had been to the London Business School for a month, and I had been at Channel 4 in the end, I was at Channel 4 the second time round for about 8 years. And what had happened was I'd been there for quite a while, and I started to get worried that I would be overlooked when June retired. I thought when June retires, they're going to just think that girl's just sat in the corner waiting for the job to land in her lap. And so I started getting really fretful about it. And I went and spoke to June at the time, and I said, June, look, I love working with you, but I want your job, don't you, when you retire? And, can you guarantee that I can have it? And she said, well, I think you should have it, but it's not my gift to give. Let me talk to Mark Thompson. And so Mark Thompson was the then CEO, and he just said, look, June, I think Jay should go and spend a month at a business school of her choice. We'll pay for everything. It should be residential. There should be no interruptions from work, no interruptions from her personal life. And she should really, really dig deep and find out what she's about. So that's what I did. So I went off to business school. And in the meantime, he had gone, Mark Thompson had gone. In the meantime, Andy Duncan had come in as CEO. And I got back. And after having done quite a lot of kind of like soul searching that you kind of don't do in your real life, I realized that I was a real wuss. And I had spent most of my career up to that time just being scared, just being a wuss, just being hardworking, not wanting to rock the boat. And that business school taught me that that's not what you do. Sometimes you have to stick your head above the parapet. And so I went back and I said, June, okay, look, let's do this then. I want you to stay for as long as you want to stay, clearly, but I really, really, really do want your job. Can you now talk to people and make sure that I will get it? And I didn't get it. And it was a really, really good thing for me that I didn't actually get it in the end. And what was really good was that, spoke to Kevin Ligo and he said, I think you're great, but no, it's just fine. And at the time, there was a job going at Channel 5 as Director for Acquisition. So I thought, well, what's the point of me staying at Channel 4? And I went. And I think the reason I enjoyed Channel 5 so much was I realised I had probably saved myself a good 2 to 3 years of heartache. I would have been that girl sitting in the corner, doing a brilliant job, by the way, getting all the shows, doing the slog. And in the end, there was no guarantee that people were going to say, give it to her. So I went to Channel 5 thinking, they really want me. They really want me. And Danny, there's nothing better than going to a job where you're really wanted. And so the time at Channel 5 was just the best because Dan Chambers, incredibly clever, Dan yourself, incredibly clever guy, very generous, very brave, and just great fun. And I was able to do that job in a really kind of unshackled way. It was just brilliant. I loved it.
And then on to ITV to give you the full set of UK broadcasters. Always an interesting one, acquisitions at ITV, because it's such a powerhouse for its own production that acquisitions play a role, but it's not probably as central as it is, say, to a Channel 4 or to a Channel 5. So a bit of a curate's egg of a role in a way.
You can say that again, Danny. I mean, the good bits was that, I got the experience of working at a FTSE 100 company, getting to see how a company like that works, even from the distance of acquisitions. is something, but it was a very tough gig. I'm not going to lie, because acquisitions isn't the central job. I went from Channel 5 where it was to ITV where it really wasn't. And in many ways, ITV wasn't the place where I was ever going to thrive. It was the loneliest job I had in TV. It really was a lonely gig. I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I got the full set. But, I paid the price. I paid the price, basically, of working at ITV.
Which series are you most proud of buying? And that could be the best show, the best deal. What was the one that really stands out?
I think the one that really stands out is going to be my first, and that's Sex and the City. I was a Channel 4 buyer. I'd only been in the job for 2 weeks, went to LA screenings and saw the second episode of Sex and the City because they thought the first episode wasn't very good, the distributor at the time. And I really wanted it. I thought it was great and managed to persuade the team that it was a good show to buy. And to be fair, when you look at Sex and the City and the earlier episodes of it, it was wonderful, but a little bit flimsy. It became something else. It was one of those things that basically my homework paid off. My homework had been watch the pilot and imagine what something can become. And Sex and the City was one of those. It was just a glorious, glorious show filled with these women who did not care about what they said and what they did. And they were just fantastic characters to spend your time with. So that will always be my favourite.
What was the one that got away? Which one would you like to have got?
There were a few. There were a few. I mean, there were a few that I really gunned for, but I couldn't get approval. I couldn't get them over the line. The one was The Apprentice when I was at Channel 4. Just couldn't get people to buy into Donald Trump, basically, and the US version of The Apprentice. And I don't think they could see somebody else in that Donald Trump role. So it was just difficult. I mean, I really gave it a go, but it got away. The other one was 24, loved 24, but couldn't get that one across the line. And the third one, I guess, would be a little show, but a really good show that in the end went for a lot of money and not many people maybe remember. And that was Malcolm in the Middle. Malcolm in the Middle, because I thought it was great and I could have got it for not a lot of money, but just couldn't get it across the line, basically. Those three got away, really, and they kind of irked me a little bit, but, can't have them all, Danny.
I think Malcolm in the Middle would have sat very nicely on Channel 4. It's just such an obvious successor to the Wonder Years.
Absolutely. I loved it.
What was your most memorable market, other than your first LA screenings, which you talked about? But was there another one where you just thought, this is why I'm in this business?
Ask most people who are my kind of age and have done the LA screenings, and they will all point to the Warner Brother party at the LA screenings when Jeffrey Schlesinger turned up on an elephant. That was just absolutely hilarious, because the thing was, I think we'd renewed our friend's ER deal at great expense, by the way. And we walked onto the Warner Brother lot. And I mean, oh my God, Danny, it was lavish. I don't think you get those kind of parties now. I mean, it was lavish, lavish, lavish. And then Jeffrey turned up on an elephant. And all I could hear in my ear was Rick Mipps, the LA consultant, going, we paid for all of this, don't you? We paid for that elephant. We paid for all of it. So that will always be really, really memorable and great fun.
Do you think the industry is a worse place off or worse off for not having markets now for the last 18 months or so?
100%. This is a people business. Creativity can happen on a Zoom call. Of course it can. But creativity usually comes when you're having fun, when you've kicked off your shoes at the end of the day, having a glass or two of wine, and you start knocking around ridiculous ideas. That's when the creative juices really, really, really flow. And that usually happens at markets. At markets, people, it's not always people you've kind of scheduled a meeting with. You bump into people and one thing happens and another thing happens. And, before you know it, you've bought a fantastic show, or maybe are a part of the creative process of somebody else's fantastic show. It's a people business, and I cannot wait for the markets to reappear, and they will. I know that in the first instance, costs will be an issue and fewer people will go to markets, but things will normalize. They will. And this is a people business, so I think they will come back.
How's acquisitions changed over the period of your career?
Oh God, Danny, I mean, it's like night and day, really. When I started out, BBC acquiring feature films, the deal was this complicated. You bought 2 to 3 transmissions, single transmissions over an exclusive 5-year period. That's it. That was the deal. You had only a couple of competitors and you had a handful of studios. Really, it was easy in that respect because everybody, it was a buyer's market. You're not talking buyer's market anymore. And that's why acquisitions now is incredibly difficult. It will never be a buyer's market again. You're talking linear TV, you're talking pay TV, you're talking SVOD, you're talking electronic sell-through, you're talking, everything, the full gamut. And you're talking also about a world now that is so different. You don't know where your next hit show is going to come from. Look at The Masked Singer on ITV. It's fantastic. It's from South Korea. Look at The Good Doctor. The format rights for The Good Doctor come from South Korea. You have to really keep your eyes and ears open to what's out there. And deals are incredibly complicated. It's very different. And I do feel sorry for new people in the business because they've kind of come at a time when it's very creative, very, very creative, lots of opportunities, but less fun, just less fun.
Over the course of your career, you've worked with a lot of very successful, very highly respected female executives, and you fall into that category as well. Do you think the TV industry in the UK still doesn't have the sort of gender equality that you think is real?
I think the gender issue is a difficult one to answer. I think we're not there yet on it, but my God, it really does warm my heart to see Jane Turton sitting there as the CEO of All 3 Media, I think Alex Mann running Channel 4, Charlotte Moore, Carolyn McCall. We have got some incredible women running the show. So I think that's got to be good. Have we done everything we can to get gender equality? No, we bloody well haven't. And that's because men have ruled the world for too long, basically. We will get there, but we're not there just yet.
Obviously, being a British Asian woman, you've had perhaps a different experience than maybe some of your other white colleagues, for example. Have you found your ethnic background a barrier in any way to progression or how you've operated in the business?
Oh gosh, it's a hard question, Danny, because I think as a person I've changed over a period of time. And I think, I don't want to sound like a bitter old hag here. I think when I was younger, I think I was just more resilient to it. And I did face a lot of racism early on in my career before I landed in TV, say, for example. Getting my first job after my accountancy degree was so hard. I could not land a training contract with a chartered accountancy firm. I just couldn't. I got one interview. I had the same degree, same qualifications as my contemporaries, by the way. I managed to land one meager interview. And in that interview, it was really clear to me that what they expected was that the very minute I joined, that I would have an arranged marriage and start dropping babies every 9 months. That was it. That was their expectation. And that was the questioning. I didn't get the job. And that was that, really. We're talking mid-80s here, mid to late 80s. So that was very hard, Danny. It was really, really hard. But I was younger and I just thought, I'm just going to do it. So I, remember, putting on a suit and going into London, and I knocked on the door of every single recruitment company that I could find. And I asked them to put me forward for jobs. And I was turned down from every single one other than the last one. And in the last one, it was Friday and I had done a lot of walking and I'm not a good walker and heels. And I remember walking into this office and asked this very nice young man to find me a job. And he gave me the same spiel. And I said, look, would you mind very much if I just sat here for a few minutes because my feet really hurt? I said, no, that's fine. And then I took my shoes off. And then I said, would you mind very much if I just had a little cry? He said, right. And I put my head on his table, and I'm not kidding you, Danny, I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And he got very embarrassed and said, look, can I get you a cup of tea? And I said, no, get me a job. I said, you've got a Rolodex there, pick a job out, make me an interview, and I'll get the job. And that's what happened. He phoned up a company. I went for an interview on the Monday and I got that job. But that was colour, Danny. Luckily, I was only in my early 20s. And I thought I had it all going on. I thought I was bloody great. But other people didn't. They saw something that I didn't see. They saw an Asian woman. I just thought I was like, great. So it has been hard. I'm not going to lie. It has been hard. And in TV, I've had to just switch it off, basically. I just thought to get by, if there is racism there, if people are seeing me for my colour, I have to just bloody well ignore it. So I've ignored it. But yes, it's been there and it's been bloody hard.
Okay, well, we'll turn to more frivolous matters now. I always ask my guests for their lockdown film, book, music, and box set. We use the term music loosely now. So if you could just choose one of those, any one of those for either current lockdown, the next lockdown, what would it be?
The TV series, I think, is relatively easy. I discovered Schitt's Creek over lockdown, and I could have kicked myself for not having found it sooner. But it was a perfect lockdown series. Absolutely brilliant. So funny and clever and touching, really. So that would be my series. Music is I always turn to Leonard Cohen when I'm in a dark place. And so listened to quite a lot of Leonard Cohen during the lockdown. Book would be, oh God, I've read a fantastic book by a brilliant woman called Tara Westover. It's called Educated, and it's an extraordinary autobiography of her life. Absolutely brilliant book. I would recommend that wholeheartedly. And the last one was Film's Hard. I've just basically found myself going for comfort food and seem to be watching a lot of Mel Brooks.
And if you had to pick just one Mel Brooks movie?
Oh, it would have to be Young Frankenstein, because I can recite the entire movie.
Well, Jay Kandola, thank you so much for being on Here Comes Pod. I can only ask you werewolf, and you must say
werewolf.
And I look forward to catching up in the not too distant future. And again, thanks for being a fantastic guest.
Thank you for asking me, Danny.